Disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before starting or changing any peptide or supplement regimen. Today we are going to take a deep dive into MOTS-c, a mitochondrial-derived peptide that has been gathering a lot of attention for its potential roles in energy regulation, metabolic health, exercise performance, and even longevity. MOTS-c, pronounced MOTS-c, is short for mitochondrial open reading frame of the 12S ribosomal RNA type C. That might sound like a mouthful, but essentially it is a short peptide, just 16 amino acids long, encoded by the mitochondrial genome itself, rather than the nuclear genome. This is important because it highlights how mitochondria are not just powerhouses of the cell, but active participants in signaling that can affect the entire body. MOTS-c was first described in 2015, and since then, researchers have been uncovering how it works. One of the most fascinating things about MOTS-c is that it is responsive to metabolic stress. When your body is under strain from exercise or facing low nutrient conditions, this peptide seems to play a role in shifting how cells use energy. It promotes the use of glucose, helps regulate fat metabolism, and can even influence insulin sensitivity. That makes MOTS-c a very interesting candidate for people looking at ways to support metabolic health, especially in the context of issues like obesity, type 2 diabetes, or age-related metabolic decline. Another area where MOTS-c shows promise is exercise performance. Studies in animals suggest that administering MOTS-c can mimic some of the benefits of exercise, such as improved endurance and better glucose regulation. Some call it an exercise mimetic, though that is not quite the same thing as exercise itself. Still, for people who may not be able to train at high levels, the idea that a peptide could help improve endurance and metabolic flexibility is exciting. Athletes and biohackers alike have taken note of this. Longevity researchers are also interested in MOTS-c. One of the consistent findings in animal studies is that MOTS-c levels tend to decline with age. Restoring MOTS-c in older animals has been shown to improve physical capacity and metabolic function, essentially making them perform more like younger animals. This raises the question of whether MOTS-c could play a role in healthy aging for humans. While human research is still in the early stages, some small studies suggest MOTS-c levels are indeed correlated with age, fitness, and resilience. From a mechanistic standpoint, MOTS-c appears to work through pathways such as AMPK activation. AMPK is the energy sensor of the cell, and when it is turned on, it shifts the body into energy conservation and repair mode. This is the same pathway that is activated during fasting, exercise, and caloric restriction. By promoting AMPK activity, MOTS-c seems to mimic some of these beneficial states without necessarily requiring the same environmental triggers. That could explain why it has been linked to improved glucose metabolism and fat oxidation. Now, let's talk about real-world applications. In the peptide community, MOTS-c is often discussed in terms of injections, typically subcutaneous, in small doses ranging anywhere from 5 to 10 milligrams per week, sometimes split into multiple smaller injections. Some protocols focus on short cycles of MOTS-c, while others look at ongoing use. Because it is still considered experimental, there is no standardized dosing, and results can vary widely depending on the person, their health status, and their lifestyle. What do users report? Anecdotally, many people say they notice increased energy, better recovery from workouts, improved mood, and sometimes even weight loss. Some report better endurance, being able to exercise longer without fatigue. Others focus on the metabolic benefits, like more stable blood sugar or less craving for carbohydrates. Of course, anecdotal reports should always be taken with caution, but they help paint a picture of what people are experiencing outside the lab. In terms of safety, MOTS-c appears to be well tolerated in the limited studies available. Being a naturally occurring peptide produced by the mitochondria, it is thought to be relatively safe, but long-term data in humans is lacking. This is why caution and medical oversight are important. Potential risks could include overactivation of metabolic pathways or unknown long-term effects on mitochondria and energy balance. Let's step back and think about the bigger picture. MOTS-c highlights a new frontier in peptide science where we are not just using hormones or growth factors, but actual mitochondrial signals to influence health. This opens the door to an entire class of mitochondrial-derived peptides that may one day play a major role in medicine and longevity. It also reinforces the idea that mitochondria are not passive batteries in our cells, but dynamic regulators of health, stress response, and aging. One of the really exciting directions of research is how MOTS-c might interact with lifestyle factors. For example, does exercise increase MOTS-c naturally, and could supplementing MOTS-c enhance those benefits further? Some data suggest endurance exercise does raise MOTS-c levels. That means peptides like MOTS-c may work best not in isolation, but alongside healthy habits like movement, diet, and stress management. The synergy between biology and behavior may turn out to be the key. There are also interesting discussions about combining MOTS-c with other peptides. Some protocols look at stacking MOTS-c with peptides like BPC, 157 or TB, 500 for recovery, or with metabolic peptides like AOD, 9604 or GLP, 1 analogs for fat loss and glucose control. Others pair it with NAD+ or other mitochondrial supports for an anti-aging focus. The idea is that MOTS-c could be part of a broader strategy that addresses multiple aspects of cellular health at once. As always, cost and access are part of the conversation. MOTS-c is available through peptide vendors, usually as a lyophilized powder that must be reconstituted with bacteriostatic water. Prices can vary widely depending on the source, quality, and dosage. Because this is still considered a research chemical in most places, it is not approved as a medication, and that means people need to be careful about sourcing, quality control, and proper handling. What about the future? Clinical trials are starting to explore MOTS-c in humans, particularly for metabolic disorders. If early findings hold up, we may one day see MOTS-c or related compounds developed into therapeutics for conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, or age-related frailty. Imagine a treatment that helps restore youthful metabolic function simply by boosting a natural mitochondrial signal. That is the promise that has scientists excited. Let's spend a little time thinking about the philosophy behind MOTS-c. At its core, this peptide is a reminder that our bodies have deep, evolutionary programs for survival and adaptation. Mitochondria were once independent bacteria that became part of us, and they brought with them their own genetic material. MOTS-c is a message from that ancient code, telling our bodies how to adapt to stress, to survive when fuel is scarce, and to thrive under challenge. By learning to harness it, we may be reconnecting with a primal survival mechanism. Now, let's circle back to practical takeaways. If you are considering MOTS-c, here are some points to keep in mind. First, research is still emerging, so approach it with curiosity, but also caution. Second, think of it not as a magic bullet, but as a tool that may amplify the benefits of good habits like exercise and balanced nutrition. Third, be mindful of sourcing and safety, and ideally work with a healthcare professional who understands peptides. And finally, remember that peptides like MOTS-c represent possibilities, not guarantees. Individual response can vary dramatically. Before we close, let's reflect on where MOTS-c fits into the bigger landscape of peptides. We have growth hormone secretagogues, metabolic peptides, healing peptides, nootropic peptides, and now mitochondrial peptides. Each of these classes offers different insights into how our bodies regulate themselves and how we might intervene. MOTS-c is still early in its journey, but it is already shifting how scientists and practitioners think about aging and metabolism. Disclaimer: this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before starting or changing any peptide or supplement regimen. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.